Hello class, Professor Mo here on Tuesday morning, 11 o'clock, and I just want to briefly talk about the allegory of the cave and give you some ideas about what the allegory is saying overall. And these are general ideas. The reason that I'm doing this is to kind of help guide you as you ask your own questions, as you continue to interact with the text, as you work on your summary and your response. This will hopefully kind of clear up any confusion you might have. I'm not going to go in and explain every single element of what's going on because that would, I think, take away, it's my ringtone, that would take away from the job that you have to do, also the fun that you get to do by deciding things for yourself. But I just want to hit a couple of main points about it, and also a couple of points about this particular kind of essay and the allegory of the cave itself. So what the allegory is really about in many ways, and of course there's ways to look at this differently, how it's explored, but it really is about how our perception is changed and shaped by our circumstances, right? And sometimes that may be beyond our control. Other times it might be in our control. The circumstances we find ourselves in, also how our environment shapes us, right? We see that in the cave, being an environment that they are not particularly choosing, or they're not choosing to be in, as far as we know. And then we see what happens when they leave those circumstances. It's also, though, about what we believe to be real, and it's an exploration, a treatise on the nature of reality, right? What is real? How do we know something is real? How can others tell when something is real? These are questions people have been asking for centuries. And of course, this is a 2,400-year-old text, so we can certainly say that long we have been asking those questions. And you know, it's interesting, I think, and I'm not throwing out any free ideas here, but it's something to think about. In the last few years, and I've noticed this, I don't know if you have, but on social media, I've noticed it on places like Reddit, that there have been a lot of people, conspiracy theorists, are among those people that believe we're living in a simulation, right? And that's a very intriguing idea that is even being entertained outside of a fantastical idea, outside of a philosophical allegory like this one with Plato, outside of something we'd see in a film like The Matrix. It's intriguing that people are willing to actually even entertain that as a possibility. It tells you something, I think, about the times that we live in, and also the reaction people today are having to those times. Perhaps the idea that we would be willing to kind of believe maybe this is a simulation so that there's some kind of an out because things are not great, right? And of course, that's, again, one perception. So I don't personally believe that we're in a simulation, but you may, and if you do, then this is going to be right up your alley. You want to really talk about this. Again, I mentioned The Matrix in the summary response video. That's something that if you've seen that film, if you feel there are any kind of maybe connections between the allegory of the cave and that, absolutely you can do that. Remember, though, reminder, you want to pretend I have not seen that film, because you always assume or pretend that your audience, your reader, has not seen or read what you're writing about. And so also the allegory of the cave gets into the idea that perception, our perception, human perception, is often incomplete and it's often flawed. And that is indeed true, right? You think about how limited these people are in the cave, how their perception is only as far as they're able to see, and as far as they're able to move. And you think about, too, an idea, an avenue to explore is how many times do you hear people who have lived in a place their whole life, and you compare that perhaps to yourself or someone else you know who's traveled, they will have a very different outlook. I have a friend who was in the military and grew up in the same town I did, Abbeville, and told me that leaving to go to the military and having to travel across the entire world for his military service radically changed his beliefs. It radically changed how he looked at the world and how he looked at other people. And that's another idea that perhaps you have some kind of really deep personal connection to, that idea of changing your circumstances, changing your perception, changing your reality, or what you thought was reality. I remember that myself, leaving a small town like Abbeville, very safe, and I would even say kind of sheltered, I grew up pretty sheltered, and going to college and meeting people of other cultures that were from other continents was tremendous for me. It was wonderful, and I learned a great deal of things. It was a wonderful experience. I think that's when a lot of people who maybe don't have the luxury of travel or they don't join the military, I think that's when people do have that exposure. And so it can be shocking, it can be negative, or it can be positive, right? And we can certainly shape that, and that's something we see in the allegory. Plato believed, and we see this right in his Allegory of the Cave, he believed that philosophers and educators, their purpose is to help enlighten other people, right? The escapee then will go on to help the others. A person who has arrived first at this new knowledge, this new perception, will then help others to arrive to it, or at least point them in the direction of that knowledge. They have to find it for themselves. The allegory comes up often in discussions about the importance of education and seeking truth itself, right? So if you are a philosophy student, you're interested in philosophy, then of course this is going to be something you're very probably knowledgeable of, certainly very interested in. I have a minor in philosophy, so I've been reading the Allegory of the Cave many times over the years. And so if you are in that, perhaps you're considering philosophy, maybe as a minor, just taking some classes, maybe you're intrigued by it, this then, even if you're in political science, there's a lot of applications there as well. Really for anything, any subject that you can think of. It's also about how we respond to ideas that really don't align with our beliefs. The nature of learning to change, right? Because that escapee has to go through that. And I don't know of a better time than 2020, 2 weeks before this election, and that's not a political comment either way, it's just an observation, for us to talk about what is it like to not respond well to beliefs that we don't share. How have we gotten to a point where people can't just really interact with one another as human beings because they don't agree on politics? And that's where we are. We've been there for many years. It seems like this is maybe kind of a pinnacle of that kind of experience. I'd like to think it means we're going to go back to a balance. I don't know. I don't know the future. But we are in that place where we don't really, some of us, we don't really align. When we find someone who doesn't align with our beliefs, we don't really get along with them well. It brings a lot of... I had this experience recently in my own life, a very awkward family situation that should not have involved politics, but it came up and it was not good. There's an old rule that I think is a very good one. 3 things you don't talk about at the dinner table. Old girlfriends, politics, and religion, right? And you follow that, or old boyfriends. You follow that, you'll be good to go. And it's true. And I grew up in a household where that was every holiday meal was about that topic. And it's unfortunate. So there are many things, other things to talk about. And you could maybe use the Allegory of the Cave to bypass that political discussion and say, hey, let's talk about the Allegory of the Cave. I just learned about that, because by Thanksgiving you'll have written this paper. It'll be fresh in your mind. So that's a possibility as well, but that's another element there. These are some ideas where you can kind of go. If you're not sure how to approach this, you're not sure what you want to summarize, these are some ideas. When that prisoner's first freed, it's painful right on the surface. The brightness of the light, this new reality, it's an brand new world. And so you could look at that from that angle. It takes a long time to adjust. The shadows seem more real than actual things. It takes a long time to figure out that the shadows are just images of what's real. Slow for that prisoner's eyes to adjust, and there's a painfulness there. It's almost like a rebirth in a lot of ways, leaving one womb, going into another one, right? People are resistant to that process. People are going to be resistant to any kind of change. I don't care who you are, how enlightened you think you are or evolved, how old you are. You could be 94 or 14 or 4, and you will not like change. It's just part of human nature. Even if you've grown up in kind of a fluid situation, I've known people who grew up in a situation where their parents traveled a lot. One of my good friends traveled most of the country with his family before he settled in South Louisiana. And he is even resistant to change. So no matter, not completely, but some things we will be more resistant to than others. He's actually one of the more flexible people that I've ever met, the more balanced and rational people, and incredibly intelligent. And I do think a lot of that has to do with his upbringing, but there are still things that, we all, no matter how we've dealt with change in the past, it's still something we resist kind of almost on a molecular level, right? And that's one of the things that Plato talks about. He doesn't just talk about it, he illustrates it, right, in this allegory. Another angle you could take would be exploring the Platonic forms. If you wanted to get into that, that's certainly an option there. You'd need to read up on that, have some knowledge of it. You have to also summarize what Platonic forms are. Again, you're assuming the reader has no idea what they are. So overall, Allegory of the Cave, one of the most popular, most widely read texts in the history of Western civilization and in philosophy. It would be very hard to find one more read, and 2,400 years we're still talking about it. So that's another angle, that's another thing that you can kind of use for resonance, for that reader, really make this relevant to them and resonant to them while we're still talking about it, and when you learn about it, you'll see why. That would be a great intro. Just overall about the essay, I would always like to believe that you're not going to plagiarize a paper. I always believed that I always believed that as a teacher. I like to be positive that way, and I don't go in going, let me start looking for plagiarism. But there are, of course, ways to find that out, and my assumption will be you won't do that. So if you were to ever plagiarize a paper, which I don't obviously endorse at all or recommend, this certainly shouldn't be the paper that you would be so desperate that you'd want to plagiarize. This is one of the easiest, if not the easiest, this class perhaps that you'll write ever, in that it is really two things. You're responding to a text, which you've had ample time to go over and to understand and resources to help you understand, and then you're giving your response to that. Your response. You don't have to research somebody else's. You don't have to summarize. It's not a 40-page paper or even a 10-page paper. It's a 3 to 4-page paper. Most of that is going to be summary. Okay, and we said in the other video 50-50, right? So about half will be summary, and half is your response to the text. And again, a reminder, not Plato, to the text, to his ideas. And so please don't plagiarize. Please don't throw away, because the ramifications of that are very serious. So don't do that for this paper. Don't do it at all, but this is an easy paper. You're summarizing and responding. That's all you're doing. And so your response is what you think about the text. I talked about this in the other video too, but it's a good thing to just remind you. Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Do you disagree? Do you agree with it? But if you do go those routes, make sure you explain why. For any route that you take, explain your rationale. Don't just say, I hate it because it's terrible. No. It's so frustrating as an English teacher, as a person who has grown up, studying English perhaps more than other people, because it's always been an interest of mine. And for you too, if that's the case for you, when like when I talk to my daughters who, really are frustrated with me because they say, why does everything with you have to be a lecture? Well, because it comes naturally to me. But they will tell me when they get in the car, when I pick them up in the afternoons from school, how was your day? And they always use generalizations. Oh, it was great. Why was it great, right? Oh, it was okay. Well, that tells me zero, right? Because your okay is going to be different than my okay. So you have to remember that when you're writing, that you want to use descriptive language. And that's something I didn't talk about in the other videos, but it's a good point. Don't use these general terms. I thought this was a great text. Why? Use more specific terminology and be more specific in supporting your main point with your supporting details. You want to use resources. You want to make sure you're being honest in this paper, right? And when I say use resources, the discussion, your annotations, reading it over and over again, this video, whatever it may be, the TED video, but respond honestly and authentically. Don't follow what you're reading someone else has said or thought about or analyzed, or how they've responded. That's not what I'm interested in. I want to know what you think, how you respond, right? And this is a paper, too, that allows you a freedom to be able to talk in the first person, to really be able to get personal. And in doing that, I would think you'd be able to enjoy that to some extent. So really enjoy it and use it as an opportunity to really engage this text, because that will only help you with other texts that you may have to read that I guarantee you will find as you go along in college. Some texts you will not enjoy as much as this one. That will not have the relevance to you that this one does, and that is always hard. When we read a text that we have to respond to or write about, and we struggle to find personal context, man, is it even harder. This should be easy, and I think it's very easy. I know I could write a great deal about this, and have in the past in classes I've taken, and so I think it's going to be easy for you. So if you're stressed at all about it, you're worried about it, take heart and know that if you are finding a lot within yourself about conflicted thinking about this, conflicted feeling about what Plato's saying, work with that. Use it. If it's something that's current events that's plaguing you, bothering you, you're stressed, talk about that. Use all of these things. These are all wonderful things at your disposal. And finally, to kind of boil it down, and I said this in the video on the summary response essay, but I want to say it again. Do you agree with Plato? Why or why not? If nothing else works for you, that can be the most bottom line, boiled down, essential response. Do you agree with him? How he looks at the world, what he thinks of humanity. Do you agree with him? Why or not? Why not? It can be that simple. That's your response. And the other stuff is very easy. You're literally taking somebody else's ideas and you're repackaging them. And you do this, right? Your video on summary, I don't know if you've hopefully watched that that video. The guy in the video talks about how we summarize every day. You talk to somebody and you say, hey, what'd you do last night? Oh, I watched the latest episode of, I don't know, what would it be perhaps that you watched? I don't really watch a whole lot of current television, so I don't know I mean, I'm trying to think of one. Excuse me, NCIS. I know you're not 70 while you're watching that, but that's the first thing I thought of. And so NCIS, maybe you're like, yeah, so last night this happened with these characters, and before you know it, you didn't even think about it, you summarized it. That's what you're doing in a paper form, a little more depth. You're responding to a text that's going to have a little bit more depth than perhaps a television show, depending, right? So it's not a hard assignment at all. It's a great way to start off, and that's why we're starting off with the summary response. So please let me know if I can help you out. Drop me a line in any way that you want, email, through Canvas, and let me know how I can help you. Take care.